Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our last part of the series. Again, this is Data Standards 101. We are going to specifically be talking about the Common Education Data Standards. And in just a moment, we are going to introduce today's speaker. And our speaker is going to talk about CEDS. We'll do a Q&A at the end. So at any time during this presentation, feel free to put your questions into the chat or into the Q&A box, and we will get to that during the Q&A, and then we'll give you some next steps. And before we get started with our presentation on CEDS today, my name is Chloe. I'm the project manager at Project Unicorn. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We would love to continue to keep in touch. If you would like to keep in touch with us, we are chatting in the website for Project Unicorn. You can sign up for our alerts, which will tell you when we have new resources coming out. We have a whole entire resource library, and you can actually sort it by school district or by vendor. And we also have a YouTube channel where we will upload all of our webinars, including this one today. So if you feel like this information is something you'd like to share with someone, you can go to our YouTube channel and share it there. And also on our YouTube channel, what you will find is this entire series. We did a 4-part series on the Data Standards 101, and we are at the very end of that series. And I am now going to pass it over to Nancy to introduce herself and tell us more about CEDS.
Thank you, Chloe. As Chloe mentioned, my name is Nancy Copa, and I am with Common Education Data Standards. I'm the project director. And I'm looking forward to talking with you all today. CEDS is a P20W national data standard. I know that you've heard from several other data standards through this webinar series, and like them, we do have K-12 in our data standard, but we also go a little beyond that. And we go actually back to birth. I know it says P for preschool, but we actually have some elements all the way back to birth. It does go through post-secondary and into workforce. So it spans the full continuum of a child from birth through the workforce. The CEDS data standard is stakeholder driven. And on the next few slides, I'm actually going to get into a little bit more about what that means, but just keep that in mind as we're going through. In addition to being stakeholder driven, we do have transparent decisions. So the community essentially is the one that is making the decisions on how the standard gets expanded, how our other resources and tools get expanded as well. The main thing about CEDS is that we do have an open source community. And you see the screenshot on the right-hand side there. And so CEDS has the elements, which you can see on the right-hand side of that screenshot. But we also have an integrated data store and a data warehouse. These are free tools that you can go and you can actually download and use in your system. CEDS is at the individual or unit record level. So it does work for schools, it works for school districts, it works for states, it works for aggregate reporting, but it also works for tracking at that unit record level. And the IDS is the normalized version of the data standard so that you can use that as your data system to store your data. Our data warehouse is the reporting data store. And so you can move data from the integrated data store over to the data warehouse, or you can use the data warehouse separately. We recently added the data warehouse Parquet, which is the ability to use the data warehouse using Parquet files. So if that's something that your organization is interested in, those are available as well. And then finally, there is the CEDS Collaborative Exchange. And this is not a tool per se that we have, something for you to go and grab and stand up, but rather this is from the community. This is where community members have used the data warehouse or CEDS language. They've built scripts that analyze the data and produce reports. And they've shared those in the collaborative exchange so that they're actually sharing resources. So for instance, at the state level, I know that very often on K-12, they're looking at a high school feedback report. And so one state or a school district or something could develop that high school feedback report. What is the script and the code necessary to pull that data and put it into this nice, neat report? They put that out on the collaborative exchange, and then anyone else can go grab it, use it against their own system, and they're able to also get the results for that report. So I want to start kind of at the beginning a little and talk about the history of CEDS. CEDS was started in 2009 by a set of K-12 organizations who came together and determined that there needed to be a common vocabulary. Very often, states were sharing data, whether it's because a student moved from one school to another, one school district to another, from one state to another, or even just moving from K-12 into post-secondary, that kind of thing. And they realized they needed a common vocabulary because everybody was setting up their own data systems. So they came together, and with the US Department of Education, they established CEDS. The first version was then released in September of 2010. And back then we had 161 elements solely around K-12. Since that time, we are now up to version 11, which just was released in February, the end of February. So it's been out about a month. And we're up to 1,800 elements. Not only that, but we've expanded from K-12. Like I said before, we have early learning and post-secondary and workforce, but we also have a ton of elements on assessments. We have elements on career and technical education and adult education. We have elements related to implementation variables. So those are going to be things like the record date, or when did you have to report this, or count the report date, count date, that kind of thing. So there's quite a bit here for the various sectors. So for K-12, early learning, post-secondary, et cetera, we have data, we have data elements on the student. So it's everything from their name, their race, birth date, all of the demographics, but it also includes where do they go to school, what courses do they take, what grades have they received in those courses, how many credits have they earned, what kind of disability they might have or special population they might be a part of. And if they do have a disability, it goes all the way into their IEPs, a lot of data elements around it. We have data elements around discipline, all of that. So pretty much anything you can think of around a student. We also have data elements for staff. So it's going to be around what is their assignment, like their teaching assignment, what is their salary, what benefits do they receive, what's their contract type like, what's their education, things like that. And then we have them around the organization. So it's going to be things like who is the principal, or what's the organization name, the organization ID, the location, financial information, all of that. So you can find all of those elements at CEDS. A little bit more on just kind of CEDS by the numbers. I mentioned before, and you can see that in the middle on the top there, that we have more than 1,800, just barely more, but we have more than 1,800 elements in CEDS. And below that number, you see almost 25,000. That's unique enumeration. So what that means is not just the data elements, but every data element has a definition. And then where it's necessary, it does have options, right? So it has a code set, if you will. And all of those have definitions as well. So the 25,000 is the elements plus the options. So for instance, we have a race element. It has African American, white, Asian, things like that. So each of those counts in that number there. On the left-hand side, you see that we have a CEDS community, and I am going to talk about who can participate in that. But right now we have about 3,000 folks that are participating, whether it is reviewing, seeing what others are doing, or it's actually commenting or proposing elements or participating in work groups that expand the standard, that expand the data warehouse. So there's about 3,000 folks doing that. And thus far, we've had 40 of the 50 states participating in a CEDS work group. And I think it might be the next slide or it's the one after. I'll actually mention what some of those work groups are, so you'll see about that. We do have 2 tools in addition to the integrated data store and the data warehouse. We also have the Align tool, which is where you can take your data dictionary, upload it, and you align it to CEDS. So you see how the data that you're collecting aligns to the CEDS data standard. That's used in particular if you don't already have a data dictionary or you need a place to have your data dictionary, or if you are trying to integrate data or link data across data systems. It's a great tool for using for that, where everybody puts in their data dictionary, aligns to CEDS, and that's used as a bridge behind the scenes to see how the data elements line up. And then the other tool that's also available is Connect, and that's where you take a metric, a research question, a reporting requirement, and you build it out to say, these are all the elements that I need in order to answer this question or, do the analysis for this metric. And these are how I put those elements together. And you can use that tool whether CEDS has the elements or not. So you have the option. You look through for all the CEDS elements that would help answer that question. And if there isn't an element there that you need, you have the option to add that element to what's called your connection. And that's that bottom number there, the 1249. Right now, we have publicly available 1,249 connections. So they range on topics. We do have early learning topics. We have K-12 topics. We have post-secondary. We have workforce. So there's quite a bit there. So I would encourage you to go to Connect and check it out. And you can search for existing connections, and that'll help you find them. So now I want to talk a little bit about the CEDS community. CEDS, as I mentioned before, is an open source community. So what does that mean? That means that you do not need to be a member of anything. Like, you don't have to sign up for a membership. There's no membership fee. It's completely open. And you can go there at any time, and you can submit suggestions or changes. You can, if you've looked at the CEDS data standard and you find that there's an element missing that you think would be pertinent, you can go to the CEDS elements, as you see on the top right there, and submit what that suggested addition would be. If you see something missing from something that's already there or something incorrect, you can also submit those changes. And the same thing is true for the integrated data store and the data warehouse and the Parquet files. As a matter of fact, the Parquet files came from working with the state and their vendor because they had a need to have it put into Parquet files. So we worked with them, the CEDS team did, to build out the CEDS data warehouse into those Parquet files. So stakeholders have the opportunity to contribute and to build out CEDS to what meets their needs. I mentioned before about work groups that we had 43 out of 50 states that have participated in a work group. Anybody can participate. You don't have to be a state. You can be a vendor. You could be an organization. You could be a school. You can be a school district. You can be a provider. Whatever term applies to your affiliation, you can be that, and you can participate in the work groups. We have a number of different kinds of work groups. Right now, we're doing a data standard expansion work group. It's centered around workforce. Last year, we did one on early learning. And so we have folks from all different types of organizations that are participating right now, reviewing CEDS to look at what elements are already in CEDS that need to be added to the workforce domain, and what questions are folks trying to answer right now around workforce to ensure that CEDS has all the elements necessary to answer those questions. We also have a data warehouse expansion. So I talked about the IDS, the integrated data store, and the data warehouse. The IDS has the full CEDS data standard, all 1,800 elements. The data warehouse is a little different. It's built on use cases. So the use cases in there are the ones that stakeholders have brought to us. So there's a lot around EdFacts, which is a K-12 state, federal report that states do. But we are about to start one in the summer, I think it is, and it's going to be around human resources. So if that's something of interest to you, questions around human resources, around, making sure you're pulling in the right folks, things like that, then you're more than welcome to join that. And you can look for that announcement to come out when we get ready to start it. And then finally, finally, we have an ontology work group that's happening right now. So CEDS, we had several stakeholders. As a matter of fact, it was 4 different states that came to CEDS and said, we would like CEDS in a JSON schema. So in starting the work group to do that work with the states, we discovered that we needed to first start and kind of build out our ontology a little better. So they're working on that. They're very close to releasing it probably late summer, early fall. And then at that point, they'll work on that JSON schema so that that ontology can easily be used by folks. So if that is something of interest to you, you are more than welcome to join that as well. It does not have to be one of these things where you join right at the beginning or you never get in. All you have to do is send us an email at ceds@ed.gov and let us know that you want to join the work group or the data standard expansion, the data warehouse expansion, whatever you might want to join, and we will be sure to get you folded in so that you're able to participate. And then finally, the CEDS vision. CEDS has been around, as I mentioned before, since 2009. We continue to evolve in response to user needs, and hopefully I got that across today, talking about the community and how the community helps contribute. They help guide where CEDS is going, what resources might be needing, but they also help build them. We do support tools built around consistent, transparent uses of data. The Connect tool that I talked about, where you can define your metric, is a great way for transparency. It shows these are the elements we're using and this is how we're using them. And we have all of the other tools available and the IDS and the data warehouse available to help support you all in your data system needs. And then finally, that it's community driven. And so while I think I mentioned earlier that this is funded by the U.S. Department of Education, which makes it nice for you all because the resources and tools are then free for you to get. But it's also cooperatively funded in the sense of the stakeholders in the field are actually contributing. For instance, building out those Parquet files that I mentioned before. So folks are doing the work as well. They're contributing to that community and sharing resources in that way. That was a very high-level version of CEDS. I do want to mention that they dropped in the chat the quarterly newsletter for CEDS. This particular one, which is the January newsletter, if you scroll to the bottom of it, it does have links for our masterclass series. So if anything I said kind of whets your appetite, I would encourage you to go check out those masterclass series. They were held this past fall. One is on a bit deeper dive than the overview I just gave on CEDS. One is on the tech stack, so it goes kind of in depth on the IDS, the data warehouse, et cetera. And then one is 2 states talking about how they've used CEDS, why they chose it, how it's benefited. And as I mentioned before, I'm talking about it from a state perspective because that's most of who we've had the opportunity to work with. But this does work equally well at the school level. So if that's what level you all are, then don't be put off by the fact that it's states talking, because it works just as well at the school level. And with that, I wanted to ask if there are any questions, and I will turn it to my questions slot.
Again, if you have any questions for Nancy, feel free to pop it into the chat, or there is a Q&A box. And we would love to answer any questions from all of you. And I'll start off. Oh, we did get one question. So in the chat, we have, how can vendors leverage CEDS?
Sure. So the standard is available. As I mentioned before, we have worked with a number of vendors. States are starting to require that vendors actually use CEDS. So sometimes it's that the data system be built using the CEDS language. Sometimes it's that the vendor's product be able to transform into CEDS for future reporting. So it just depends on the vendor themselves, but they all have the ability to interact with CEDS.
Great. And another question, do standards organizations like One, EdTech, or EdFi also leverage CEDS?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because yes, we work with A4L, One EdTech, EdFi, and PESC, which is the post-secondary version. We work with all of them. We have agreements that if they are adding a new element, they look to CEDS to see if it is defined yet. And if we are adding a new element, we look to them to see if it's already been defined, so that we're not confusing the space by creating potentially conflicting definitions. So as we expand the standard, we are continually working with those organizations.
Great. And another question, how many states have adopted CEDS as the required standard?
I do not have a number on that. I can tell you that there are about 20 states who have or are in the process of implementing the CEDS integrated data store as their data system. Now, whether that's taking their legacy data system and pushing the data into it, or they have completely replaced and no longer have that legacy system, but there's about almost half the states have started doing that. We imagine that a number of additional states will continue moving that direction, because EDFACS reporting, which I mentioned is the K-12 federal reporting for states, EDFACS reporting is now going to be using CEDS data elements. So they will want to do it so that they can get their data kind of in line for that federal reporting.
Great. And if you have any more questions, please put them into the chat. Another question, Nancy, how does someone seek out help, or where do they go to get started with CEDS?
Oh, great. So there's a couple of things. First, you can go to the CEDS website, which I know was listed in the chat a little bit earlier, ceds.ed.gov. You can go there, and if you go to Explore CEDS, it will show you kind of some different things that you can do. In addition to that, reach out to us, ceds@ed.gov. We love giving presentations, demos. Normally, I don't do a slide deck. I just have a live demo. And so we are more than happy to provide a demonstration. We're more than happy to have conversations with you about what challenges you might be facing and how you can use CEDS.
Great. And I just chatted the link into the chat again. And then we have another question. What is the difference between an integrated data store and an operational data store?
The term. It's literally just the word. They're the same thing.
Awesome. And lastly, can you just tell us one more time how someone can get involved, just so that we can end on that note?
Yes. Sorry, you did ask that. Sorry. To get involved, go to the CEDS website, and if you scroll down, you will see the open source community. And you have two options on CEDS. One is GitHub, which is that open source community itself, where that's the picture that you kept seeing, the screenshot with the IDS, et cetera. The other is called Communities 360. And that's where we do all the announcements for the meetings. So if you're wanting to get involved in a meeting, you can go there. There's a calendar, so you can check out when those meetings are. That's where the newsletters live. That's where we will send out information as well. So you can go there to find out more about getting involved. But I would highly encourage you to start with the GitHub and then check out the meetings on that Communities 360 site, so that you can see which meetings might be of interest to you.
Perfect. And if you have any other questions, feel free to throw them into the chat that we are going to wrap up here today. So if you're wondering right now how you can learn more, just in general about the data standards and about interoperability within K-12, well, Project Unicorn is here to help. A couple steps you can take is to first sign the Project Unicorn pledge. We have a vendor pledge as well as a school network pledge. When you sign the pledge, you are committing to your journey within interoperability, or if you're a vendor, you're committing to make your products more interoperable. And when you sign up for that pledge, you will get an email that has you schedule a call with us. You can do that with or without signing the pledge, but feel free to schedule a call with us so that we can learn more about you. And lastly, for our school systems, we are currently running a survey called our School System Data Survey. And this is for you to understand where you are within 6 domains within interoperability and sort of assess your maturity level. And we are also giving away an incentive of a $25 Amazon gift card for all respondents. So feel free to take that survey or ask us if you have any questions. Otherwise, thank you, Nancy, and thank you all for joining the webinar today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.